Coming up today on New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones, lawmakers are taking aim at gun safety in the state.
It's not just in our communities, but gun violence, as we've seen, whether it's in the cities, whether it's in around our country, has significantly increased.
If you ever tried to get a hold of a state agency and felt like no one is listening, someone says they hear you.
This is the one thing that I take personally, that you don't treat people with respect.
Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I'm Laura Jones and it's so good to have you here. Some New Jersey state lawmakers are wanting to create a government office to make sure that other government offices in New Jersey are picking up the phone. We have Senator John Bramnick, a Republican representing New Jersey's 21st legislative district. He's standing by. First, we are talking about gun safety. Recently, Governor Phil Murphy called on the state legislature to pass the gun safety bill package while visiting St. Luke Baptist Church in Paterson.
No, it's not fair that day after day members of our New Jersey family are being shot and killed. And it's outrageous that their state government in Trenton isn't doing everything it can to stem this tide of gun violence.
Here to talk about that and so much more is Senator Joe Cryan, a Democrat who represents New Jersey's 20th legislative district. Senator, so good to see you.
Laura, good to see you as always.
Yeah. So you and your legislative colleagues and Governor Murphy recently renewed a push behind several gun violence measures. So can you talk us through the specifics of the package?
Sure. There's a variety of different items in the package. The governor has taken a leadership role on them, and just in no particular order. One is the requirement of firearms training. In other words, that when you get your permit for a firearm, that you complete a certification of training that you've properly utilized that firearm. Second is the elimination of 50 caliber firearms, 50 caliber bullets actually. The safe storage of firearms, how we do them in each home and how we actually store each firearm. Out-of-state firearms and closing a loophole is the way the governor phrased it. Essentially what that means is that when you bring a firearm in from another state, you move to New Jersey, which lots of folks do, that you have to register those firearms. Raising the minimum age for purchase of handguns and rifles to 21, rifles and shotguns to 21. We currently do that with handguns currently. Electronic ammunition record keeping, so that when you buy ammunition, that there's an ability to track that purchase of ammunition to the actual purchaser of that, and that would be required through ammunition dealers throughout the state. And a microstamp technology that in essence allows you to, if you do this within a firearm, it requires it within a year. It would allow the opportunity to trace the actual cartridge that's utilized within the weapon to the actual weapon that's been fired. So there's a variety of different things. It's a well-rounded package.
Yeah, and I think what makes it a little unique is about the technology. You know, when you hear a lot about gun safety, the technology is certainly unique. Now, the administration initially introduced these proposals as recently as last year when they stalled. Now, the composition of the legislature, it's changed a bit since then. Some might say it's a little less favorable for these gun violence measures, although we have a new Senate president, perhaps more open to the ideas. Do you see signs of promise today that were not there a year ago?
I do. I'm more hopeful. I think just the fact that what you mentioned, the change in the Senate presidency, I think will bring a more broad-based view of New Jersey for this. But I also think you're exactly right in terms of the other piece of it. The composition of the legislature has changed. There's more dynamics of those who might look at this as an infringement in the Second Amendment or different things. So I think there's going to be different viewpoints for it. But I am hopeful. I think people look today, Laura, around them in their surroundings. So we're in New Jersey, and it's not just in our communities, but gun violence, as we've seen, whether it's in the cities, whether it's in around our country, has significantly increased. And I saw percentages on a show last night, 46% increase in New York City in crime in just the last 2 years in terms of gun violence. Those sort of things people want their elected representatives to be proactive on, to do things about, and to use common sense measures where they can. And I think these are part of that and I think these are part of that solution.
One of the initiatives, which one do you believe will receive the strongest opposition, and that's the bill to raise the minimum age from 18 to 21, and that's for the purchase of long guns. Can you clarify that? And
Sure.
and that is that where you think you're going to get the most opposition?
I think it's going to get a lot of opposition. Matter of fact, I know it's going to. It has a lot of opposition already. So let's talk about what it does. It's a bill that says, hey, today in New Jersey, you can buy a shotgun or a rifle at the age of 18, but you cannot buy a handgun until you're 21. Now let's think about that. The obvious things that come to mind, right? You can't buy alcohol. There's certain things you can't vote. There's certain things you can't do until you've reached the age of 21. I think most folks would say, well, purchasing a weapon at the age of 21 would seem to make sense, right? We're different people from 18 to 21. Anybody who's the parent of a teenager knows that. So when you take a look at those sort of things, the idea is simply is to make the law uniform. If you want to purchase a firearm in New Jersey, whether it be a rifle, a shotgun, or a handgun, that it is in fact at the age of 21. And yes, that's going to create and has created quite a bit of controversy. I don't particularly see why that is a difficult thing to understand, but it's clearly what we're going through right now. There's a lot of challenges to it. There's effective lobbyists that say it's an infringement upon rights. Certainly, I think one has to balance that debate versus the greater good of society and safe society as a whole, and I think that will be part of our discussion.
Yeah, well, purchasing versus using, I know, like, I live in an area, Hunterdon County, where you have a lot of hunters, a lot of fathers and sons, fathers and daughters, mothers that yeah, they enjoy going hunting during their teenage years. So how does that impact that, or
You can
does it?
still, I apologize. Well, yes, you can still do that. There's no reason you can't do that.
Okay.
And look, let's be clear. One of the things that I don't want to say the other side, but folks that maybe see this a little bit differently often talk about is the fact that they are law-abiding citizens. And they are, absolutely, unequivocally. It's not an attack. It's not an act of, we're trying to do smarter, proactive things to enable the opportunity for gun violence to potentially be reduced. We're not looking to make good people bad people. I couldn't agree with that more. So I think when you look at that here, should you be able to take your son, your daughter, and teach them gun safety and the opportunity? Of course you should. But should that person be able to buy a shotgun in New Jersey at the age of 18? I think most of us would say no. 21 seems well enough. Same as a drink.
Right.
You can have a drink with your son or your daughter. You can do other things today, right? As of last week, you can even buy some marijuana with them now, but you're required to be the age of 21. I think it's just a common sense step.
Yeah, well, and you're not new to this issue. Almost a decade ago, as a member of the Assembly, you introduced legislation that would limit the capacity of magazines and also mandated the passage of mental health screenings to obtain a permit. So what are you thinking? Are you impressed by how far the state has progressed in the past 10 years, or maybe disappointed? Mental health is an issue. Or, how far or short we've come when it comes to gun violence measures.
Well, I think in terms of, if you look at New Jersey from around the country standpoint, many would say we're among the most stringent. But when you look at New Jersey and the fact of how densely populated we are and how much gun violence we've seen over the past 10 years, you'd like to think that you could do more. So there's obviously two sides to the coin. But I'd certainly like to see us do more. I don't see anything in these packages or these particular bills that's offered that reasonable folks don't say, hey, by itself, that's not a bad idea. 50 caliber bullets, for example, pierce armor, pierce bulletproof vests. There's no one, I think, today that would argue that we want our police officers to be safe or anybody else. I think
You bring up
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was
Yeah.
going to say, you bring up law enforcement. You are a member of the law enforcement community, having served as Union County Sheriff. What do your colleagues in law enforcement wish to see in terms of gun violence policies, focus on the promotion of existing laws, additional reforms? What do they think what do they believe would make it safer to perform their jobs?
Need to be clear why these bills that were presented, that are kind of the basis of what we discussed today, are important. They don't fundamentally close all the loopholes. The loopholes here are, and many New Jerseyans have heard this before. I know you have, Laura. The New Jersey Turnpike is considered the iron highway, right? We get illegal weapons consistently from from Virginia, North Carolina that come up. Getting illegal weapons off the street would be a vast improvement and something all of law enforcement would very much like to see. And the traceability of those weapons when we can is as far as important as well. The things that folks watch and see on the national level. Can we get background checks? Can we get traceability to purchases? All those sort of things. Eliminate the gun sales, the gun show sales, and all those sort of things. That's what's important. Do these bills cover all of that? Absolutely not. But do they make a difference in terms of the potential safety of the lives of New Jerseyans? Yes, they do.
So your bill, you're looking to close loopholes, and all you can do is what you can do in New Jersey as a New Jersey lawmaker. Do you think something else needs to happen? One final question, just at the national level, do we need a uniform federal policy to end some of these interstate challenges?
Laura, we do, and I just want to give you a quick example. A couple of years ago, we passed a bill to eliminate ghost guns here in New Jersey. Ghost guns being untraceable weapons that potentially you can purchase a less than an 80% ability to put together a weapon off the internet. You and I can do that today without any issue if you're not living in New Jersey. We've passed a law that says that that's illegal. We saw the President of the United States take executive order action just a couple of weeks ago on that matter, because as we've seen from large city mayors, the continued growth of ghost gun use is a frightening situation for every citizen in this country. So I think we need to do more of that on a national level. Do I think we will? No, I don't. I think the country's too divided to see proactive legislation that's uniform across all 48 or 50 states. I think that's a pipe dream at the moment.
All right. Well, Senator O'Kryan, we thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about these issues and explain a little bit more in detail about what it means, because you hear a blanket statement and you really were able to explain quite a bit. So we thank you for all the time that you took today.
Always good to see you, Laura, and thank you for what you do.
And thank you so much. From responsible gun ownership to taking responsibility for government services, I recently spoke with State Senator John Bramnick, a Republican from the 21st Legislative District, on making sure if you need to get a hold of someone from a state office, your call is answered and your issue is addressed. All right, Senator John Bramnick, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's so good to see you.
My pleasure to be with you.
All right, well, there's a lot going on in Trenton, and I want to talk a little bit about government accountability. Now, during the election back in November, you had a commercial, and it was fantastic. I thought it was just really funny, and you were talking about how quick you were when somebody wanted to reach out to you, how quickly you would return a phone call. And we tested it out on you, and you returned it within 30 seconds. That was impressive. But in looking at state government, it isn't always that easy because there's so many people, so many needs. So let's talk a little bit about government accountability. What are you seeing that's happening now, and are there some areas where we can improve?
Well, I'll tell you something. It's the most frustrating part of my job. You want to call motor vehicles, you want to call labor, and what do? You get people hiding behind voicemail. You got people who are not responsive. I'm not saying all the time, but you try to call, one of these places. It's a disgrace most of the time. You can't get anybody on the phone. You call in other states, when I'm in Florida and I call motor vehicles, they're really nice. How are you? How can I help you? Here, they're mad at you. I went into motor vehicles one time and the lady didn't even say good morning, right? I understand it's a frustrating job. Guess what? We all have frustrating jobs. I find it really annoying. They should be 100% with you trying to solve the problem as opposed to creating a problem.
Well, you bring up an interesting point about they may not be hiding behind a voicemail, but when you call, you get into this voicemail labyrinth where I feel like you need a degree from MIT to sometimes navigate it. I speak from experience having a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old just trying to get a permit and to get a test. You can't do that. I had to go to a driving school in order to cut through the red tape. And I'm fairly good at cutting through red tape. A lot of people don't know how to cut through that red tape. How can we make it simpler?
Well, I have one bill that when you press 0, it should be an option, and either somebody picks up or they leave a name. This is Joe Smith, leave your name. So there's some accountability. You can't even find anybody. I called once, and I'm not going to tell you the department because I don't want to I'll do it offline, but I called one and they go, nobody's here. Everybody's out for lunch. Now they don't know they're talking to the Republican leader at that point. So I called back a few people. I said, what are this? Everybody's at lunch. Well, somebody's there, right? And they're all at lunch. Really? That would never happen in my law office. Never happen in the private sector. You'd be out of business. This is the one thing that I take personally, that you don't treat people with respect.
Are we dealing with issues post-COVID of workers being at home and there's just a logistical or a technical issue to where they're not physically there and the phones aren't transferring to the right people?
Too bad, right? I don't want to hear it, right? I don't want to hear it. You've got a responsibility now, and that's why I have a new law. And the law is the legislature has one person who for every 30 days reports to the legislature who this person is going to try to call departments, even call regulated companies like health insurance companies and insurance companies, and see if you can get anybody on the phone, try to see if you can navigate their website, and let's publicly expose every 30 days the people who can't answer the phone and can't help people. It's absurd, it's disrespectful, and I find it offensive. I can tell you right now, if I was a governor, okay, I'd be making anonymous calls to departments, and they better pick up the phone. I'll tell you that.
It almost sounds like kind of like the secret shopper that goes in, and if you don't greet, if you work in retail, then you hear about it. What are the state union, those that represent state workers, what are they saying about this?
I don't think they're talking about it. I mean, why would they talk about it? Because my law didn't pass. And look, I don't have a problem with unions, right? And I understand they're there to protect their employees. I'm talking about the fact, if you call a department or you call a health insurance company, I want somebody to answer the phone. How about this one? You're a doctor. You're trying to get approval for an MRI or chemotherapy for a patient. They wait 2 hours to get approval. I had a woman in my office, very serious cancer. She said the pressure and the stress of trying to get treatment was worse than the cancer.
That, getting to the right person is sometimes half the battle. Just like you said, reaching a person. Now, you said this is just a proposal. The Democrats have control. Democratic governor. What is the likelihood that this type of legislation would pass?
Well, it's interesting. I think the Democrats, because they actually publicly criticized the Labor Department and the Commissioner of Labor. First time I've ever seen a party in power actually criticize their own administration. But here's the problem. If you are the governor of the state, Republican or Democrat, do you want somebody checking up on all your departments? I would. I'm just not sure that the Murphy administration or the Christie administration, anybody else would like my law, which in essence interferes with their autonomy as running the executive branch. So I love it. Is it going to move? We'll have to ask President Scuteri and Speaker Coughlin.
All right, well, you can keep us updated on that. And on the topic of accountability, during COVID, a lot of parents were able, because of remote learning, to get a look inside what was happening in the classrooms, for better or worse. And now there have been some changes to curriculum, and it's ruffling some feathers. A lot of it has to do with expanding curriculum to cover some diversity issues, and there are some parents that are not happy about this.
Well, if it was just diversity issues or some frustration, I wouldn't weigh in. This has to do with teaching gender identity to kids in the second grade. Now, let me just say this. You could tell kids in the first grade or second grade, you're a dinosaur, right? Kids have great imaginations. You're going to tell them, you're not sure what your identity is. Look, as they get older, I think it's a legitimate topic to talk about. I think it's important. I think we've eliminated a lot of discrimination in this area. But first or second graders, you're going to talk about gender identity, have a right to choose. Let me tell you, first, how are teachers going to even teach this? I mean, how do you learn how to teach it? Second, when they come home, the parents have to talk about this. This is absolutely wrong. Leave it alone. Middle schools, high schools, maybe, I have a problem with it. But second grade, okay, it's an overreaction by society to a problem that really existed. And there were gender identity issue with people. And I think this is typical government overreaction. Just like people overreact to the stock market, this was not done by the legislature. This was done by the State Board of Education. Leave the second graders alone on this stuff. They're all going to get an F on this test because you may explain this. You've got children. You're going to explain this. I had a tougher time telling my son when he was in 8th grade, and 7th grade, and 6th grade what it was all about. You can tell a second grader, right? So.
And are parents not able to opt out? Because when my kids were in elementary school, 4th grade was when you got some of the information in your health class. But as I understand it, can't parents just say, you know what, I'd like to opt out, but for those who might need some resources, they want to be able to have that lifeline for some of those who are very confused and may not have any help at home.
Well, it's a great idea, but not second grade, okay? I think it's just too early. Everything you've said makes some sense at some stage, right? Because we want to help children who have issues and are confused, right? But 1st or 2nd grade, I mean, this is and you know me, I'm a moderate Republican. I'm open-minded to everything. This is over the top. It's a mistake. I think it's way too confusing. You want to explain this to a 1st grader? It goes against common sense. I mean, I've spoken to liberal, moderate, conservatives. Nobody thinks this makes any sense. It's just, I think it's ridiculous at that age. That's all.
All right. Well, we're going to see how all of that unfolds as well. We're coming up on budget time. The governor has, proposed his budget, and what do you think, Republicans? What are some of the priorities? A lot of always a good chunk of it of the budget focuses on education. So what are some of your priorities that you hope will be heard? Because the governor's laid out his. He said, hey, some New Jerseyans are going to be getting a check back, a little bit of a rebate, so to speak. So what are you thinking?
So you need a message to not only, let's say, your own political party, but you need a message to say New Jersey is moving towards fiscal sanity. How do you do that? You don't pick and choose everybody who gets money back. Give some money back to everybody and make sure that businesses who've had to pay this high unemployment tax as a result of COVID, start to show that you respect all elements of society. You need to send a message. You don't have to go to Florida. You don't have to move to South Carolina, that we're making a move in that direction. What has Governor Murphy done to send that message that we're changing our priorities in terms of how we tax, how much we tax? There's no message like that. More money the government gets, the more money government spends. That's a really bad message, big mistake. So fiscal integrity, fiscal sanity is the message that I need to get out. And right now it's not getting out.
Well, and not only are people leaving the state because of the affordability, and again, going back to my own experience, I have a daughter, a senior in high school, and I can't tell you how many students, and it's a New Jersey school, so few are staying in New Jersey. A lot of them are going out of state where schools are less expensive. So, how do is that part of some of the priorities, ensuring that we keep our students in the state, those that we've educated to K through 12, keep those students, incentivize them, because, Rutgers is not cheap. Sometimes going out of state, even paying out of state tuition, is more expensive than staying in state at a state school.
Well, you said it. I mean, pretty much, how do you get that message out? It has to come from the top. It has to come from Governor Murphy. It has to be, listen, we're starting to make some changes here. Fiscal responsibility is the word of the day. We're going to continue to make it less expensive to live in this state. Otherwise, guess what? The parents see it. They tell the kids leave. They don't come back. So it's a global message that comes from the top. And I don't think anyone thinks, even though I like Phil Murphy personally, that's not his message. I mean, he's a spender. I get it. I mean, I disagree with him on that policy, but that's the message that these kids get through their parents, through taxes, through comments. I spoke to a second grade once, and this little girl raised her hand, and she said, "Put one of those yellow stickers on your everything you send out with that smile. You know, that face you
The
see." What do they call it?
smiley face.
Right. I said, "Why is that?" She goes, "Because every time my parents get a letter from the government, they're unhappy." So I thought it was a great line by this brilliant second grader. I think we were up in Long Hill School District.
That's a great idea. A simple little sticker. It makes you smile. Then you
Yeah,
don't dread
I'm
going
not
to your
sure it's
mailbox.
enough. I'm not sure it's enough when you get your tax bill. Go, "Hey, look, here's my tax bill, but hey, there's a smiling government son official on my piece of paper." Anyway, I just think common sense is not something you see in government. I think part of it is gerrymandering. The fact that people have to play to the wings of their party. I think that's the biggest problem in the country, biggest problem in New Jersey. And if we could have very competitive districts where people be in the middle, like 70% of New Jersey and 70% of the country, we'd have a different country, maybe a different world.
Well, John Bramnick, we thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on so many topics. It's good seeing you.
Great to see you. Hope everything's well and stays well.
Absolutely. Same to you and yours. And that will do it for today. Thank you so much for watching New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.